The former Swiss military town of Andermatt is being hit by an Egyptian tour de force. Samih Sawiris is a property developer renowned for building entire new towns. On his resume is a Red Sea resort now home to over 20,000 people.
I didn't come looking for a place to do a project. My consultation was obviously to come and check out what could be done here, since the army was pulling out and they needed to do something for the village so that it doesn't completely collapse, economically speaking.
He came in as a consultant, but he saw potential. 6 hotels, 25 chalets, 42 apartments, and an 18-hole golf course, an investment of almost $2 billion.
My report sounded so crazy to the Swiss that they said nobody would do this crazy thing. And then I said, well, I would. And then they said, okay, if you're serious, come and do it.
The Swiss are known for their independence, and there are strict laws in place limiting foreign ownership of property. Before Sawiris took a plunge on Andermatt, he did what was seen as the near impossible. He got an exemption from the state.
The local population started really believing in their future and the potential of this place, and they started to invest as well. I mean, this new boutique hotel, which is really super cute, is because we are here. There are like 2 new restaurants down the road, and all these buildings, as you can see, have been freshly painted and rented out. No, there's a great boom in town.
Former Mayor Ferdi Muheim now watches the town change from the counter of his butcher shop.
When Sawiris came, the hope came back, and I told to the young people here, you can go to study now in hotel business or something, and you can, in a few years, you can come back here and you will find a very good job for your life here.
It all sounds good for the locals and tourists alike, but with the phased build, which could continue for the next 30 years, they'll need the same resolve Sawiris had when he first convinced them of his vision for this alpine village. John Defterius, CNN, Andermatt, Switzerland.
So who is this Zion of Egypt's richest business family? Here's Executive Talk with our Editor-in-Chief, Orascom.
Welcome, Mr. Sawiris, to the Executive Talk. You're a very busy man. You're always around. You're always traveling. You have projects and you have developments all over the world. You're Egyptian, but you live in Switzerland. You live in London. You live all over the world. Where is home for you?
Well, I feel at home in Switzerland. Obviously, I feel very much at home in Egypt. It's still my real home. And I feel at home in London because I have my wife and children there. And as long as I don't need to worry about getting into home and not finding this or that, I feel at home. So obviously it's not very difficult to plan your life to have several homes where you feel at home.
That would have been my next question. What is home for you? Is it actually where your family lives? Is it where you do business? Is it where people welcome you?
To be very honest, I feel at home in any place where I am completely surrounded by an environment that is receptive and welcoming. This is the main thing that triggers this feeling of I'm at home.
Do you get that feeling everywhere in the world? Or
no, definitely not. I get it now in Zurich, I get it in Cairo, I get it in El Gouna. You know, El Gouna on the Red Sea, this is the first project that I started almost 30 years ago, and I feel at home in London. So you cannot really tell me that why is this better than that. They all have something in common, which is this triggering factor to make me feel at home.
If you don't get that feeling of welcoming, is it because of Samih Sawiris, the man, or is it because of Samih Sawiris, the businessman? Is it because of your projects, your ventures?
No, it could be that I'm not often enough in there, or I don't have enough friends, or my stays are in a hotel. And then obviously this doesn't give you this sense of home.
You said it yourself. Switzerland has become a home, and you've come here some years ago already to start a project which, in the beginning, many people thought was an illusion, a dream, or something completely extraordinary. Andermatt. Tell us again, how did you get that idea of developing, let's say, a sleepy little village in the middle of the Swiss mountains into something completely different?
Well, many years ago, the Swiss ambassador to Egypt returned to Switzerland and moved to the army. And they had a moral obligation towards Andermatt because they were reducing their presence there. And because of their presence, this village never resurfaced as a touristic destination, although it was one of the first destinations in Switzerland to ever become international. Queen Victoria was there, our ex-king's father was there, and many royalties. Goethe was there, you know, and as such, the obligation of the army was to see what they can do to help the village now that they're reducing their presence and therefore reducing the income for the villagers. And this ambassador knew El Gouna very well and told his boss, you know, I know this guy in Egypt who built a whole town in the middle of nowhere, and he has like 20,000 people living there now. So why don't we ask him what we could do in Andermatt? And this is how I was invited to come the first time. And I found it really so funny that the Swiss government is calling a guy from Africa to come and consult them.
But actually, you read
that's why I came.
You read it the same as you did in El Gouna in Egypt. Really,
obviously.
Develop something from nothing.
Yeah, this is exactly what made them ask me to come. Since I managed to create this out of nothing, why don't you come and tell us what we can do out of something? And to be honest, when I first saw the reactions of the entire Switzerland, I was wondering a little bit like, wow, they really don't know what they have.
But speaking of that, of these reactions, I mean, some people said, who is this person? Why? What's behind it? Why is he interested in Andermatt? I mean, there was some suspicion, let's call it that way. Did that hurt you on a personal level as well? That I mean, you've been very successful before.
Not at all, because actually I had this experience everywhere I went. I mean, even in Egypt, when I started this project, instead of going to Sharm el-Sheikh or Hurghada, I decided to go in the middle of nowhere. And everybody thought I was crazy. My father even was telling everybody, oh, it's just an excuse so that he can go fishing 2 days a week. Because at that time we had only 1 day off. We were working 6 days. And this was not very seriously taken as a project in the beginning. And so I knew that this reaction is normal. I was not surprised. I would have been surprised if people had said, yes, great idea, bravo, and so on, because it's just not done.
That's something that goes through your whole career. You start ventures and projects, which in the beginning people might say, even your father said, this can never be done. Is that something typical for you as a businessman, as a human being as well, that you try to challenge yourself?
As a businessman, yes. As a human being, no. As a human being, I'm quite down to earth in my aspirations and actually don't do anything extravagant in my personal life. But in business, it's always been the driving force to do something that others don't do or haven't done, so that I don't need to compete. The fear of competing was always the driver in the search for something new, something that nobody has done or nobody is actually doing, so that I'm all alone and I have a quasi-monopoly that allows me to work at my pace and allows me also something that I'm very proud of, not to make unnecessary compromises. When you're in competition, you need to sometimes cut corners here or there. You need to do things that you don't really want to do, but the market wants it. Otherwise, you will not be able to compete. So when you're doing something all alone, you can do it the way you want.
But that's very interesting point. So that means that if
it's always been like this, by the way.
As long as you don't have any competitors, and as long as the idea is, I would say, crazy enough, you're successful.
I started building fiberglass boats in Egypt. At that time, nobody was building fiberglass boats. And that gave me almost 4 or 5 years of monopoly. And I was making a lot of money, and I was still not working very hard. So this edge gives you the pleasure to be dictating everything in terms of pace, in terms of what you aspire to do in that business and not be pushed by the market. You can dictate almost market conditions when you do that.
By having like a unique idea. And it needs ideas. What strikes me also in this interview, you've alluded to it once or twice already. They said, you know, you don't have to have that many ideas. Or I've read interviews with you where you said, I'm not someone who comes with ideas, but I have good people around, and you're very modest in your approach.
No, I'm really receptive to ideas and I make use of them. I mean, the best compliment I ever got in my life was when somebody was saying, that guy dreams, and the only difference between him and everybody else who dreams is that he wakes up in the morning and executes his dream. Or that guy listens to someone's idea and takes it and executes it. And this persistence is maybe something that I'm proud of, that when I find an idea good and not necessarily my idea, I will go and do it. I did the same thing, for example, with the winery in Egypt. And there was this gentleman next to me on the plane, and he was telling me, you know, I love Egypt very much, but you have to do something about your wine. It's horrible, it gives you a headache. And at the time, the Egyptian wine was famously called Chateau Migraine, you know, like headache. And I said, you know, the Egyptians, they don't have this patience to really get into wine. You need 10 years. Because first you have to buy the land, and you have to cultivate the grapes. It takes 5 years for the first true harvest to come out that you can use for a good wine. And then you start making the wine. So all in all, it's 7 years. Nobody wants to wait. And then he told me that's not true. You can buy the grapes, take out the liquid, and then ship them wherever and put back the water and start the fermentation, and you have a good wine after 3 months. I said, oh, that's a great idea. And sure enough, I made this winery, and as I said earlier, there was no competition. There was only Chateau Migraine and me. And that made it so much easier to get into the market and take over the market. And I made lots of money from this idea.
You should pay that man royalties.
I offered him a partnership. Can you imagine? But he didn't have the guts to come in and put some of his savings into the project. And he missed a big chance.
But that's a good example of your persistence. You follow things through. And I've read somewhere your motto is never take no as an answer. Is that one of your main mottos in life, that you go on with your ideas?
Yeah, I think persistence is almost as important. You know, persistence and guts and perseverance are almost as important as hard work, and almost as important as intelligence for the success in business.
You had a lot of success. I mean, let's be honest.
The main factor is still luck.
You say that, and that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. You said it all the time, but
I believe in it. It's not a joke.
Can you just be lucky and be as successful and as wealthy as you are?
If you're not lucky, you can be as smart as Einstein, as hardworking as the best Swiss guy, and as persistent as a stubborn Upper Egyptian, because we're known to be very stubborn where I come from, and persistent, but you'll get nowhere. It's really so much about luck in life. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't recognize this, or they don't want to recognize this, and attribute it to hard work and intelligence. I don't buy this theory at all.
You had a lot of luck in your life, but I can imagine you had difficult times as well. What would you say was your biggest failure?
My biggest failure was when I eluded reality after the Luxor massacre, and decided that it's going to go away, just like every other little terroristic attack that we had. But it was so hard and so long that ignoring reality was basically my biggest mistake.
And you lost a lot of money around that.
Oh, I was almost bankrupt. I was technically bankrupt, but the banks were very merciful in Egypt because the entire industry was hard hit. And as long as you were paying them a bit of the interest, not even the principal, they